Hi, I'm Ken Leibow with Insurtech Express, and welcome to our webinar today on transforming life and annuity operations, unlocking efficiencies with Agentic AI. I'm joined today with Jon Mayo of TX Minds, and we're very excited to be able to share some very important strategic information for your operations, whether you're a carrier or an agent or an agency that sells life and annuities. With that being said, I will let Jon introduce himself. Jon?
Hey, Ken. It's great to be with you again. We've known each other for quite a while, going into the decades by now, I'm afraid to say. And here at TX Minds, we've been investing a lot of effort and attention into applying the latest in AI technology to insurance operations, not just within the life and annuity space, which is particularly germane to this particular conversation and the upcoming LIMRA event that we're all looking forward to, but also in other markets for insurance, such as property and casualty and healthcare and so forth. So we've got a pretty broad basket of experience in leveraging the latest in AI technology across multiple insurance workflows to aid in efficiency, increase accuracy, integrations, and all of the pain points that carriers and MGAs, MGUs, IMOs deal with when they are attempting to automate, whether they're looking at new business, marketing, claims, all of the different processes that workflows have been built up around insurance operations. I've never run into a situation where we couldn't improve it in some way.
Well, yeah, and so what I like to do, Jon, is just take it back one step for those that are not as versed on agentic AI. I mean, when we look at the huge AI explosion going on, in 2023 we had OpenAI, ChatGPT, which was all about generative AI for social media and creating all types of documents and reports and contracts and emails, etc. And then in 2024, last year, it was all around LLM, the large learning models, and training and learning and building out data and around that. And agentic AI is typically around, as far as I know, it's like complex tasks or workflow in general, using reasoning and decisioning, which is less human intervention, right, to achieve certain objectives, and it is powered by LLMs, right? Mm-hmm. But maybe you can expand on more than, and I'm happy to go into how it's being used in life and annuities on the task side of it, but expand on more things. Sure. On how agentic AI is used.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea to kind of do a quick history lesson of how we got to where we are today and how agentic AI differs from the AI of a few years ago, and all of the various process automation technologies that we've seen in the insurance industry over the past, say 10, 15, 20 years. So ultimately, if you start at the very beginning, whether or not you have automation, you have workflows. And in the old days, if you went into a claims office or a CSR's desk, they would have, in effect, a checklist that would define what tasks need to be performed, what order they need to be performed in. And the more complicated checklist would have logical branch operations, a binary thing like, if in this situation, go to this table. If in this situation, go to this chart. And ultimately, you would walk through that workflow manually. And obviously, that is very 100% human in the loop, and it's also slow and inefficient, because even in situations where the steps are automatic in terms of there's no decisioning to be done, you still have to go through those manual steps. So the first part of automation was in attempting to make those processes run smoother in an automated fashion. And if you think back, for those of us that are old enough, back in the old scripting days or batch file days, where you could set up a series of operations to occur one after the other until something errored out, and then you'd have to get involved manually. That was really the first evolution of automation. Then if you take a look at the application stack and commercial software offerings, companies started zeroing in on that particular phase of insurance operations, and that led to the development of what we now today call BPM applications, so workflow applications. And some of them were specific, for instance, document workflow, archive workflow, claims workflow. Others were more generic workflow automation toolkits, thinking like when Pega came out or Appian. Some of those applications that are horizontal but have been customized for different insurance markets by putting in place specific workflow
And,
automations.
and I just want to make one point about that. I'm glad you brought that up because when we talk about, I think I'm hearing you right about like business logic. Okay, you got to write rules for everything, and then as things change, if you don't have a rule for it, you got to go back in and you got to reprogram it and test it all the way through and build a new rule where when you're doing reasoning and scenarios happen and it can learn by itself and then it can recalibrate to handle the situation, right? Isn't that the fundamental difference between like the Pega stuff you're talking about and what Agentic AI does?
Yes, if you look at it, if you look at the evolution, where we are with Agentic AI provides for a couple things. Agentic AI provides for real-time learning, self-healing, and the ability to, when I say self-learning, that is basically you complete a task, and let's say that you have a task and the Agentic AI engine determines that there are 4 possible outcomes and doesn't know which one's the correct one. So it would kick it out to an individual. That individual would look at the 4 options and review the material and select the best option. Now the Agentic AI engine learns from that. Next time around, it might only present 3 options or 2 options. And then eventually, when it has 85, 90% accuracy on one option, that now becomes a fully automated step. But it might take 50 transactions. It might take 80 transactions with a human in the loop before it learns and now can do that task in a fully automated fashion.
So here's an example I like to tell people. This is kind of an analogy, which is, let's assume you had your AI managing your calendar, okay? And you were out in downtown and you were at a lunch with someone, and all of a sudden there was a big accident that's going to cost you an extra 30 minutes to get back to the office. An AI, it could be smart enough to see the accident and see that you're not going to make the second appointment and then try to reschedule it for you automatically because it got that information, and then it actually does that action where we don't have to figure it out and contact people and do all this manual or call an assistant to do it. That it would do something like that automatically. Is that kind of an analogy? Right?
That's a great analogy, and it reminds me, for those of us that are frequent flyers, the airlines do that right now. If I have a delayed flight and it's going to impact a connection, my app immediately bings and tells me what my alternative routings are to get to my destination. And that is a great example of applying AI workflows to real world situations. And in that case, it's a physical world, right? So it's dealing with all of the variabilities that go into fueling, pilot rest time, crew availability, all of those things. Where in the insurance world, we're looking at things like subrogation. We're looking at cutoffs for manual review of claim amounts. It could be looking at policy data to determine effective dates and coverages, and all of that can be done automatically. The real trick with Agentic AI is when you level it up to what we call multi-agentic AI. So it's like the difference between an individual and a team, or a single performer and an orchestra. So you can have the best guitar player in the world, right? But unless you have somebody who can play with their hands and then also do something with their feet, you're only going to get one instrument at a time. Where if you have an orchestra, you can have different people concentrating on different parts of the overall movement. And that's what multi-agentic AI is the ability to have multiple AI agents working in concert together, each focused on a different part of the workflow. And you'll hear this term used within agentic AI. You'll hear orchestration. And orchestration is the art of managing all of these different agents so that their work is all completed and collated to give you the outcome you're looking for.
Yeah, and I just want to add too. So when you look at your business ecosystem, and what we connect today with trading partners is we use APIs, right? Which allows me to take a third party partner system and seamlessly integrate it into my process. So
Mhm.
now what we're doing is that we still have that on one level, but then we can put the agentic AI so that we're not just limiting it to what we our own internal process, but we can now connect it to the third parties as overall, right?
Exactly. And those APIs can link to obviously anything. They can link to applications, they can
Mm-hmm.
link to data repositories, they can link to applications and data that reside within the company's
And
firewall,
documents as well, right?
documents, and structured and unstructured data. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
you could be looking at things, everything from an Excel spreadsheet document to a photograph, right, or even a video recording. And you can, and if with the right API and the right application running behind that API, you can extract data that then becomes actionable as part of the decision-making process. Like, for instance, photographs of a vehicle involved in an auto accident. Those photographs can then be processed through an AI engine to derive real-time repair estimates. And that's, companies are doing that today. The difference is that while that application exists and the data exists, how do you take that and merge it in with all the other elements of the workflow to make the process more streamlined and more automated? Same thing on, like the life insurance side. Life insurance has very specific underwriting criteria, and that
Right.
underwriting criteria can vary based on the type of policy and policy amount, and those workflows are defined to a large extent. But the question is, how do you make that automation run smoother and faster and be more accurate so that you
So
can return results faster?
yeah, so John, so I saw two interesting things in underwriting from two different vendors. One was a an underwriting workbench that was part of a policy admin system. And let's say the underwriter was looking at a female, 45 years old, type 2 diabetic, buying $500,000 of 20-year term insurance. Okay. And what the AI did was it looked into its history of policies and how they were underwritten. And they said, with the exact same client profile, 86% were standard or table A or whatever. And then so not only can it give the analytical intelligence matching it up to your criteria, but also then for based on you could have it set up where if it's over a certain percentage, take this action and actually issue it at that
Mhm.
underwriting, right? And so that's one thing I saw. The other thing that I saw was that on kickouts, people that qualify for, let's say, an accelerated underwriting program based on age and face amount, but then they order the MIB, the RX, and everything, and they say they're taking this medication or whatever, and it kicks them out. So I saw a plugin to a workbench, an AI plugin that basically created a dashboard with all the raw data, the scoring that happened. But what it does is that it still wanted the underwriter to make the final decision to pull that trigger, but it
Mhm.
helped the underwriter make the decision by taking all the analysis and creating a certain type of a score that says, okay, this is where I think, based on that, saving them a lot of work of reading through
Mhm.
APSs and looking at all the data and everything else, what kicked it out, but getting them there where they can, quickly make a decision, and then they could do that. So those are some underwriting, I've seen leveraging AI to
Right. And
help.
you brought
So,
you you brought up a really good point, which is that Adding agentic AI or utilizing agentic AI does not mean you forego your existing work, existing applications. Agentic AI can be um, augmented on top of existing processes. So to your exact point, if we're consulting with a carrier and there is a particular issue that they're running into in, say, the underwriting process that's requiring a higher degree of manual intervention, or that we know the data is there, but it's just not accessible quickly and summarized in a collated environment in which the person can very quickly look at the data and make a manual decision. So the ability for agentic AI to be layered on top of existing processes is one of its strengths. And most of our work around insurance workflows is not developing workflows from scratch. It is
Right.
looking at existing workflows, particularly those that have been, I'll call them RPA enabled. So they've already gone through one level of evolution beyond the series-driven, logical-driven workflow process that I described earlier in our conversation, where
Right.
they've inserted RPA into that process to help improve the automation process. So what agentic AI does is it takes that concept and layers it up in another step of complexity and capability. And once you have that in place, you can leverage everything you've already done, the investment you've already made, and then do things just like you described. If there's a particular process where it kicks out under certain situations, you can set the AI agents up to do what you described, and then possibly even more in terms of self-learning and automating that to where then that then becomes a fully automated process, and that type of situation doesn't kick out anymore.
So Jon, let me ask you this question. This is another hot area that I hear about, and I think this crosses all sectors, but let's talk about it from a perspective of life and annuities. It's customer service. So when you're doing, a policy beneficiary change or a bank change, or you're going to file for a claim, right? So where does agentic AI fall into the customer service world?
That's probably the area where agentic AI has seen the strongest adoption industry-wide, not just within insurance, but industry-wide has been in the area of customer service. And some companies have done it very well, some companies have not. And ultimately, if we take it back to insurance specific rather than horizontal across industry, the customer service typically breaks down into generally what are called levels, L1, L2, L3 customer service. So the goal typically is not to eliminate people. It is to free up people to concentrate on the more complex situations. So most of the initial automation is done at the L1 level, simple things, like an address change, right, or a beneficiary change. Okay. And then when you get into more complex situations, for instance, the exercise of a rider, I want to exercise a living benefit, or I want to exercise my LTC benefits, because for, like, say you have a hybrid annuity, right? So you have you have some LTC coverage, you want to exercise that. So those types of customer service would be at a human level.
Right.
The other part of it is that even if you're at a higher level of customer service complexity, to your point earlier, AI can help gather all of the information and present it in a way from multiple sources, whether it's archive data, whether it is current pricing data, whether it's facility data, and pull all that in and present it so the customer service rep has everything they need to communicate with the client, with the insured, without having to go look things up, without having to do a lot of research. And that's a huge benefit as well, right? And that's blending, Gen AI with agentic AI. And that's perfectly reasonable and fine to do. Not every task is an agentic AI task, right? There's plenty of cases where all you want to do is produce a summary document or a list of available options, or you want to produce a summary of past transactions. And Gen AI is great for that. So we can combine those together and, in effect, create custom solutions that solve those particular business issues that the client is having. In customer service, typically, it's about freeing up people to spend more time on the more complex cases so that the insureds get that person's undivided attention, so they're not having to deal with what are fairly simple tasks that they don't need to be focused on with their level of training and expertise. That's more about, okay, I know how to work the system, so I can go in and change an address. We can teach an agent to do that.
Well, let's talk now about, which I think is a very critical part of any type of working with data and clients and documents and personal information, and that's security and compliance, right? Whether it's the protecting your data or having the guardrails on the AI or making sure you're meeting all the regulatory and industry compliance rules. And so if you could talk to that a little bit.
Absolutely. So there are several different issues. Well, one that probably the core would be regulatory risk, right? So there are certain regulations that insurance companies operate under, right? Whether it's ACA or HIPAA or different DOI regulations. There are anti-discrimination rules they operate under from an underwriting standpoint. There are that are in place from past legal. So all kinds of different regulatory environments that they operate under. Then on top of that, you have reputational risk, right? So you might not be technically violating an insurance regulation, but you might put your customers' trust at risk. So what insurance companies have always been very careful about is exposing their clients' data. We saw this ourselves when we went through the cloud migration era, right? How many times we heard CIOs say, we're never going to go to the cloud because I can't control my data, I can't protect it, we're going to keep our data center, and it took, 10 years for people to get comfortable with the security in cloud environments. The same type mental gymnastics are going on in the AI world right now. And the real issue is this. There are open AI engines, right? There are AI engines that are hosted outside of the United States. There are AI engines that themselves learn from all of the transactions that are run through them. Right. So there are definitely risks, especially for people that are new to AI and don't understand what the problems are. The law of unintended consequences. Okay.
Right.
We've seen that with code, right? We see people upload code to an AI engine to do a code review, right? But it's proprietary code, and all of a sudden, the IP a software company has that they've spent, maybe a decade developing, that's just been exposed, to a public domain web engine because one of their engineers wanted to have the AI engine check their code. Right. So another example, but ultimately the way that you manage that is by acknowledging that there are certain parts of these processes that need to be protected. That could be data. That could also be the actual mechanics of the workflow or the logic in the workflow. Like, for instance, a lot of these engines contain anti-fraud processes.
Right.
And if those anti-fraud processes were exposed and known, then it would be very easy for somebody to game the system. They could say, hey, I know they look for these 5 things. And if I put a claim through that bypasses these 5 safety checks and it automates the process, I can get a payment on a fraudulent claim, right? So you don't want people to know that. Okay. So ultimately, the way you get around that is you have the proprietary information protected and contained within the company, within your firewall, within your environment. Okay.
Right.
And then through the use of secure APIs, you bring in that external data. You bring in the customer data through a mobile app or a portal. You bring in third-party data through APIs that link you into third-party data repositories for publicly available information or subscription information. Right. But there's a need from the very beginning when you're architecting your system to think about security, think about proprietary data, and how you're going to isolate that. And it's important to think not just about the regulatory risk and statutory risk, but also
Right.
about reputational risk as well.
So, John, this is something I learned. So, for example, if I was using a Microsoft Copilot, Gemini, ChatGPT, rule number one is never put your personal information in there because it's in their data. So the big question is that, okay, you have your own LLM you've built, but if you're using the ChatGPT, using an API and using their engine, okay, isn't it the AI you should be using? You mentioned there's a lot of open source stuff out there. So because even if you're using your own LLM, but if you're using their engine, is there still a risk that your personal information is exposed out with them because they're taking your information and they're doing whatever it's doing to, it could be using both your data as well as third-party data.
Mm-hmm.
And does that expose your personal information?
It does, and it can. There is a process where you can use external open sources properly, and that's primarily your data, right? So you can take advantage of the capabilities of that platform by taking out personally identifiable information, right? But you have to be very deliberate about that. It's no different than, say, if you're doing database work, right? And you have a third party who is doing data analysis for you, right? You're going to give them scrub data. You're going to give them redacted data because that way, even if it did leak, no one's going to be able to associate that back to an individual. Right? Now, the cases where there have been exposures has been when that process was violated, right? When the data that was sent to the third party was not properly redacted. So good processes prevent that. Now, with data, that could be a human mistake. Somebody could attach the wrong file to an email, or they could FTP the wrong document. In the case of automations, workflow automations, that process can be very tightly locked down. The event will not occur because you have a process in place to prevent it from happening.
So there was a big run. A lot of carriers were hiring data. This is pre-AI, hiring data scientists. Are those data scientists now the ones that are implementing these agentic AIs, or is it being done by third parties, or what's their role in it? Because obviously, I know there was a big investment and a big run on that for a while.
Mm-hmm. And the whole idea behind the explosion in the field of data science has to do, I think, more with the application of data, the use of data, than about the tools in which data is used. And let me draw the distinction. So, data scientists are used to help extract the signal from the noise. We put it that way. Okay. So if you think about it, at any given time, you and I are sitting here right now, there is all kinds of electromagnetic radiation passing through us, all around us, everywhere. Our computers are putting out Wi-Fi signals. Our cell phones are pinging towers. All those things are going on, right? And the issue is you don't care about all of that. You just want to tune into the one frequency and extract the information you're looking for, right? And that's an analogy with what data science does. Data science takes this huge pool of data that's out there, okay, and makes it manageable. Helps you pull the relevant information that you need from all of the sea of irrelevant data that's out there. Now, once you've done that, okay, once you have actionable data, then what you do with it, how you use it as part of your workflow, or how you use it as part of your decision making, is a largely separate issue. But data scientists can be involved in that. because there's the integration point. Like different companies have different approaches to data. Right. For instance, some companies, if they have a main, like in the case of insurance companies, policy admin systems. So, and we often say it's the system of record, right? It's the single source, right? You go to, so that means the data in that policy admin system is the top level data. However, a lot of companies say, I want to have all of my data available, not just my policy data. And so they'll
Right.
create data lakes, data warehouses, right? Where then that becomes the single source of data. And data scientists help design all that, help figure out how to build the data structures so that they can use that data not just for the policy systems, but also for reporting, for audits, for all the different processes they do,
Sure.
financial planning, all of that stuff.
Well, I know we're getting low on time. From an agentic AI perspective, if we were to say what are some one or two key takeaways you would want the audience to take back with them, what would be some of your key takeaways?
I think part of the number one would be the art of the possible. Okay? Thinking about, if you look at the evolution of emails, fax machines, technology, and you see how far things have progressed. Okay?
Mhm.
Agentic AI is a similar step in the automation process. Okay? And that's why you see so many people talking about it. Okay? But because it's new and because it's not as prevalent as RPA, not as prevalent as Gen AI. People are just getting used to Gen AI, just starting to get comfortable with using it, and then boom, here's Agentic AI. Okay, so the way I would encourage people to approach this is not from a technology standpoint. Okay, I mean, you could technology is great, but ultimately it's what you do with it that matters. How does it help you? Okay, and that gets into ROI as well. You don't just want to throw money at something because it's shiny, right? You want to have some benefit. So my thought is, if you think about your workflows, whatever they are, if you're a claims guy, your claims workflows, right? If you're a marketing guy, your marketing workflows. How do you acquire clients? How do you manage distribution? If you're an underwriting guy, how do you underwrite policies? And where are the areas where it would help to have a platform in place that could augment and improve your existing workflows through some of the things we talked about at the very beginning of our conversation, the ability to orchestrate across multiple agents, the ability to learn, the ability to build on integrations and APIs and pull in internal data and external data to help with your decision-making process. All of those are valuable. Those are all things that your competitors are looking at today and are in the process of implementing or have implemented if they're cutting edge. Most are in the process of implementing, so it's still early. But those are the key benefits from a business standpoint that people need to look at.
Well, I have to piggyback on what you just said. I've got my two takeaways. One of them is I like to quote two PwC stats. One is on the topic you just talked about, which is a 45% reduction in data processing time using AI implementation. So speed and reducing costs is a huge, I think, benefit from putting agentic AI into your workflow. The second thing is that 89% of customers would switch for a better digital experience. So when we look at the front end, whether it's the sales process or the policy servicing process, by if we can leverage agentic AI, imagine, you're trying to call a number and no one answers, or you go to a website, or you get transferred, or you have to submit something and wait 2 days to get an answer back, right? On something you need help with, that whole customer service, or even that sales process. If we can, so leveraging agentic AI for providing a better digital experience as well. For me, those are the two key things that I think of that I think the audience should take away. So
Yeah, exactly. Agentic AI does not exist in a vacuum. You have to apply it to a particular process. We went through, with COVID, we went through a huge digital transformation. Every company went to digital that weren't there already, right?
right,
And so that investment's already been done. So the question is, can you make it better? Can you make it more efficient, faster, make it easier on your clients and prospects? And Agentic AI can certainly help with that. Once again, it goes back to the art of the possible. And from an insurance standpoint, I think one thing I want to mention is as we close out our time is that the real issue is that you need somebody who understands technology, right? It has great tools, and has access to the latest information, the latest platforms, the latest technology around agentic AI. But what's equally important is the domain expertise, because that's how you apply it to the business, right?
sure,
So what we're doing, at TX Minds is we are intersecting the best tools and technologies with the domain expertise, so that we can deliver practical solutions, pragmatic solutions, not just toolkits and technologies, but actually solve business problems. And that's been the recipe for success, is looking at a workflow, looking at whether it's a pain point or looking at a existing project and saying, how can we leverage agentic AI to make this better? And that requires a level of understanding about that customer, that prospect's business, what products they write, what the underwriting process is like, what the claims process is like, what the customer service process is like, so that you can provide valuable information to them that resonates with their business beyond just the technology.
And John, what's the website for TX Minds? So if people wanted to learn more about the product offering.
Sure, txminds.com. And we're the insurance solutions and AI group of the larger Testing Experts, testingexperts.com as well. So Testing Experts has been going strong for over a decade. We're one of the top global test software testing firms. And TX Minds is a evolution of Testing Experts focused on applying the latest in technology to specific domains. And so when you see behind me the TX Minds brand, that brand represents that intersection I was describing earlier, that intersection of tools and technologies with domain expertise.
And John, just to mention, we're both going to be at the Limmer Conference in Orlando,
Yes.
right? That's coming
Very much
up.
looking forward to it. Yep.
Yeah. So please, people that are watching this webinar video, also look us up at the event, at the conference. We're going to be there, and so I think this has been great. For those that want to reach me, you can go to insurtechexpress.com, and we're here to help innovators with capital, talent, and marketing. That's what we do. TX Minds is a client of ours. We really believe in what they have to offer. They're on the cutting edge. They're innovative. They definitely going to save you time and make you more efficient. So absolutely, reach out to John and visit TX Minds and the Testing Experts website.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ken. It's been great to catch up with you again after all these years. And I look forward to being with you in person in about a week.
Absolutely. Me too. Thank you, John.